conduct this meeting wholly electronically and to effectuate both the emergency procedures authorized by FOIA and the emergency ordinance, the Young Adults Advisory Council Subcommittee on Urban Planning and Transportation needs to make certain findings and determinations for the record. It is a bit cumbersome, so I ask you in advance for your patience. So first, because each member of the subcommittee is participating in this meeting from a separate location, we must verify that a quorum of members is participating and that each member's voice is clear, audible, and at an appropriate volume for all of the other members. Accordingly, I'm going to conduct a roll call, and I ask each subcommittee member participating in this meeting to state your name and the location from which you are participating. I ask that each of you pay close attention to ensure that you can hear each of your colleagues. Following this roll call, we will vote to establish that every member can be heard and hear every other member. So I'll first start with myself, Casey Judge, calling from Falls Church, Virginia. And Denver?
Denver Supervisor calling in from Fairfax.
And Sarah?
Sarah Bufano calling in from Fairfax.
All right. So I'm going to actually pass the gavel to Sarah. So since Denver's got dual duty, at this point, I'm going to pass the virtual gavel to one of my subcommittee members, Miss Sarah Bufano, so that I may be heard to make the requisite motion. Here's the gavel. I move that each member's voice may be adequately heard by each other member of the subcommittee.
I second that motion.
There we go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, and the motion carries. Second, having established that each member's voice may be heard by every other member, we must next establish the nature of the emergency that compels these emergency procedures, the fact that we are meeting electronically, what type of electronic communication is being used, and how we have arranged for the public access to this meeting. Therefore, I move that the state of emergency caused by the COVID-19 pandemic makes it unsafe for the subcommittee to physically assemble and unsafe for the public to physically attend any such meeting, and that as such, FOIA's usual procedures, which require the physical assembly of the subcommittee and the physical presence of the public, cannot be implemented safely or practically. I further move that the subcommittee may conduct this meeting electronically through a dedicated video and audio conferencing line, and that the public may access this meeting by registering through the meeting link on the Fairfax County Public Meeting Calendar at https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/calendar/showcalendar.aspx or by calling 1-844-621-3956 and entering access code 129-024-4785. It is so moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion carries. Finally, it is next required that all of the matters addressed on today's agenda must address the emergency itself, are necessary for continuity in Fairfax County government, and/or are statutorily required or necessary to continue operations and the discharge of the subcommittee's lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. It is so moved. And I don't think I need a second or a vote on that. So with that, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. Graham, do we have any written comments in advance or any individuals wishing to speak?
No, we have one attendee who raised a question in the chat, which we can deal with whenever you'd like. But it was just kind of a request for just information on kind of the Young Adult Advisory Council's purpose and kind of what we do as a group, and we could probably also talk about the subcommittee whenever you'd like.
Sure. So we can go ahead and address that now. Graham, do you want me to speak to the overall purpose, or do you want to speak to the purpose, the board's stated purpose of this committee?
You could probably tag team it if you like.
Okay.
Yeah. Avi, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this is a subcommittee of a newly formed BAC, Board Authority or Commission, which is a group of individuals that's been appointed by the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors to look specifically at ways in which the county can incentivize young adults to come to Fairfax County, and once they're here, to stay here. So there's a lot of there's kind of a stated problem, I guess you could say, or a stated need in terms of retaining and attracting young adult talent, not just from an economic development standpoint, but also from just a fiscal standpoint. We spend a lot of taxpayer dollars educating youth, but once one of the issues is that once they go off to college, a lot of them aren't coming back to Fairfax County. So this group is a relatively small group. I think we have 15 seats on our council that is appointed by the Fairfax County Board to look at that issue in particular and develop strategies. So if you want, Casey, would you want to talk about anything in particular about the things that we're kind of going over and kind of the purpose of this subcommittee in particular?
Sure, yeah. So we've identified some focused topic areas for subcommittees to specifically discuss, to look for information and different ways that we can get involved in subcommittees, and then report back to the larger committee of the whole and see if there's any, role that the committee can play in different topic areas. So this one is the Urban Planning and Transportation Subcommittee meeting, and we are really just getting started and just identifying the role that we want to play in the different topics that we're interested in. Specifically, I know we've identified placemaking, making sure that not only Fairfax County, but the region has a great public transportation network that's interconnected and integrated, so you can get to and fro where you want to go. With the urban planning piece, we want to create exciting, great places that people, young adults especially, want to live. And obviously there is an affordable housing component, but we do have a subcommittee specifically looking at affordable housing. So there's a lot of overlapping, kind of directives. And so tonight, I know with our agenda, we'll be looking specifically at kind of what are the tools that are in place now. And then going forward, we're going to discuss what different data we want, what different groups we want to come and speak to us so we can make sure we have all the tools in order to effectuate any change that we want to see in the county. So is there anything else that anybody else wants to say on those topics? All right.
I think it was a great summary, so thank you.
Sure.
Casey, if you'd like, I can pull up the agenda just so we have a kind of a roadmap of where the meeting's going to go.
Yes, that would be great. And I think the agenda was shared. So if there's, anything else that we want to discuss in new business or anything at the end, we can obviously do that. So we thought we'd start out, just like I mentioned, with a foundational quick overview of the two kind of urban planning land usey tools that we currently have in Fairfax County, to give that foundational knowledge and understanding. And then the second topic, like I mentioned, was looking at, talking about different data needs, resources, and what this group wants to be, bringing in so we can come back to the fuller committee and provide any guidance. So with that, are there any other comments before Graham kind of tells us about the comprehensive plan? Cool. All right, Graham, I'll let you take it away.
Hello.
Do you need me to? Oh, you got it. Okay, here it goes.
Is that good? Can you see it now?
Yes.
All right, good. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming. And also just thank you for, interest. I know that we had the scoping session, which I was not able to attend last time, but I'm really glad that you were able to kind of fill out the questionnaire, kind of the scoping sessions. And I think that really kind of gave, I think, everybody a good snapshot of the interest and kind of the general philosophy and kind of thought process behind how young adults kind of interact with the urban environment and the built environment, and what could be improved to make for the kinds of communities that we want to live in. So what we were going to do, is, as Casey mentioned, was give an introduction to the two things that are probably the most critical in terms of land use planning in Fairfax County. One is the comprehensive plan, which I'll cover, and then the zoning ordinance, which Casey's the expert in that. So she's going to kind of take the second half of this presentation. So before we kind of jump into the comp plan, just a couple of things to just kind of set the stage.
Graham, I don't want to interrupt you, but we are seeing the like your note slides. If you want to switch to the display settings, I know you keep all your secrets and your speakers.
All my
notes,
secrets.
so
I don't want you to see
just-
what I'm talking about. Yeah. Sorry. How about that? Is that better?
There you go. All set.
Man, now
Okay.
I'm upset I don't get to know your secrets.
I know. I shouldn't have told him,
I
but,
can send the slides around later.
but my
Okay,
secrets are coming next, so I had to speak up. Just kidding. Sorry, Graham. Go ahead.
It's all good. All right. So why do we do land use planning? So planning is, I think, extremely important for communities. It helps provide that long-term perspective and guidance so that we can ensure that we have a high quality of life. I think that's really kind of it in a nutshell. It's really about the quality of life for the people that live and work in the county. So what do we do when we're doing land use planning? We're establishing goals for the community. It's really kind of also about promoting the public health, safety, and welfare. That's something that we in planning school, when we're going to planning school, that's the thing that really gets drilled into our heads, is that we're trying to affect change in a positive way to promote health, safety, and general welfare. Land use planning is really also a tool for managing growth, change, and renewal in a community. And in some places, you don't see a lot of change, but that's obviously not the case in Fairfax County. We're a dynamic, multifaceted place. And really, planning helps us to balance the diverse community goals, because you do have kind of on a daily basis disparate and sometimes conflicting community goals. Sometimes for transportation improvements, sometimes for environmental considerations that you're constantly trying to balance, and the decision makers have to grapple with. So this is planning. Planning helps to set out the framework in which you can make these decisions. So a couple of things regarding kind of three stakeholders in the planning process. There are obviously plenty of others that we can get into if you'd like, but I wanted to focus on three that are kind of the county specific stakeholders. So the first one is the staff department of planning and development, of which Casey and I spend most of our work and most of our time in. The department, our goal is to promote livable communities, enhance the quality of life for the present and for the future. But basically what we do is we provide proposals, advice, and assistance on land use development and zoning issues to those that make decisions. So we're staff. We do not make decisions except for those that are kind of administrative in nature. When it comes to land use planning, those are handled by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, but we do staff and provide recommendations to both of those entities. Within our department, this is our org chart, as you can see. We have kind of three main divisions. The first, which is shown here in blue, is the planning division. So that really deals with the long-term vision for the community. So looking at the comprehensive plan, which we'll go over. They also do planning studies, plan amendments. And then we also have some specific functions that deal with specific topics. So public facilities review, heritage resources or historic preservation. We also monitor the plan from a numerical standpoint, just to make sure that we in our projections and our forecasts that we're being realistic in terms of the kinds of planning that we're going to be doing in the future, and that we keep up on it, and that we maintain forecasts that can be fed into what's called the COG model, which is our regional model for looking at growth kind of across the entire DC metro area. We also have a community revitalization and urban centers section that deals specifically with some of our older commercial areas. So looking at places such as Annandale, Merrifield, Bailey's, Crossroads, Seven Corners, and then also our urban centers. So those being Ruston and Tysons, obviously. So that's the planning department does a lot of various things, but it's mostly focused kind of primarily on the long-term vision and the long-term growth of the county. So that's the planning division. On the zoning end of things, we have the zoning administration division and the zoning evaluation division. So zoning administration, that primary function of the division is to enforce, maintain, and administer the provisions of the Fairfax County zoning and noise ordinances. This is accomplished through investigating and processing violations of the ordinances and codes. They also analyze and draft amendments to the zoning ordinance, or in some cases rewrite the zoning ordinance, provide interpretations of the zoning ordinance, respond to appeals of various zoning ordinance determinations, and then also deal with permit applications. So things like building permits, what we call non-residential use permits, home occupation permits, that sort of thing. Casey, before I jump in, anything else that you'd want to add regarding zoning administrative division, since that's your dailiwick?
You are good to go. You've covered the basics, so thank you.
All right, sounds good. And then the final division is the zoning evaluation division. So this division processes all of our zoning applications through what we call the entitlement process, and they formulate recommendations to the approving body. So those being the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. This division also responds to requests for interpretations of what are called proffer statements and development conditions. So much of the work that DPD does really kind of relies on outreach and coordination with the community and elected and appointed officials. So whether it's a comprehensive plan or a zoning ordinance amendment or rezoning application, a really big part of the job is ensuring that the community is fully aware of the proposed changes, that we solicit input, that it's not just a one-way street, but that we're actually actively going out to the communities that might be impacted by any proposed change. And incorporating comments in a meaningful way. So our public engagement process is quite extensive. We do it on a very, very regular basis, both on the zoning end of things as well as on the planning end of things. So the community kind of at writ large, they can get involved in our practices in a lot of ways. This includes being invited to review proposed changes to both the comp plan and the zoning ordinance. We also seek comment during the plan amendment and zoning process. So we really try to invite comments so that people are not just attending meetings, but actually submitting comments that they can then see, in some cases, get reflected in changes to those plans and those proposals. We also have in Fairfax County task forces and land use committees. So task forces are, as you might imagine, kind of tasked with the idea of performing a specific planning or zoning function. And so that might be just a body that's arranged to look at a specific plan amendment, for example, and they might be a community group that's particularly impacted, so they might sit on a task force. And then we also have land use committees in most of our magisterial districts. And so these are entities that are standing groups that help provide advice and recommendations to their particular district supervisor on land use matters. All right, so that's the community and the Department of Planning and Development. We also have a planning commission. So Fairfax County has a 12-member planning commission. It includes representatives from each district plus 3 that are at large. Members of the planning commission are appointed by a member of the Board of Supervisors, and this group is there to advise the Board of Supervisors on all matters related to the orderly growth and development of land in Fairfax County. So this can include the review of many different types of applications and amendments and plans, but they're specifically looking at a couple in particular. So the location, character, and extent of all public facilities in the county. So we call that public facilities review. Also looking at the amendments to the comp plan, the zoning ordinance, and the public facilities manual, the PFM, which is our design and construction manual once projects go through the entitlement process. So it kind of sets out those for very specific standards for like width of sidewalks, for example, that sort of thing. They also review rezoning and special exception applications and plan amendments, and then they also review the final development plans, comprehensive site amendments, all types of entitlement applications. And then finally, the most important stakeholder, I guess you could say, in Fairfax County is of course the Board of Supervisors. We have a 10-member Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County, 9 that are appointed within each district, and then we have an at-large chairman. The board appoints the county executive, Brian Hill, who is the administrative head of the county government, and he is responsible for the administration of the affairs of the county, which the board has authority to control. The board's responsibilities as it relates to land use include passing resolutions, ordinances, approving land use applications, approving amendments to the comprehensive plan, zoning ordinance, public facilities manual, et cetera. And then also making appointments. So making appointments to the planning commission, for example, also making appointments to all of our other boards, authorities, and commissions, including the Young Adults Advisory Council. All these meetings obviously take place in open meetings where the public is encouraged to attend. All discussions are held in public with the exception of issues that are exempt from VFOIA, such as legal and personnel issues. In addition to this, I would mention one other thing, that the Planning Commission and the board also have their own standing committees related to land use, housing, transportation, a lot of different specific sub areas and focuses. And these are also open meetings where members of the board, sometimes they're smaller committees of board members, sometimes they're what's called committees of the whole, which is when the entire board comes to a specific committee meeting to discuss topics related under one of those focus areas, so housing, transportation, land use, etc. But then those committees will then also provide recommendations to the full board. All right, so with that in mind, let's talk about the comprehensive plan, or as I've referred to it a couple of times now, the comp plan. So the Code of Virginia requires localities to prepare a comprehensive plan to shape its orderly development. So this plan is used as a guide to decision-making about the natural and built environment by the Board of Supervisors, as well as by the Planning Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals. It is a guide. It does not have legal authority as a regulatory entity, but it is very important. And in Fairfax in particular, we absolutely do follow the plan in almost all cases. But it is a recommendation. It's a plan. It's policy. It's not required. So I would just mention that in a lot of cases people kind of get the two terms confused between kind of regulatory and policy, and we'll get into that once Casey starts talking about the zoning ordinance. But I would just make sure that everybody knows that the comp plan it's a guide. It's not law. All right. So there are a lot of components to our comprehensive plan. The full comprehensive plan takes up about half of a bookshelf. It's extremely long. It's divided into 5 main volumes. There's one that's called the policy plan. And so this deals with countywide objectives, policies, and guidelines that affect all of Fairfax County. So this is looking at specific topics such as land use, transportation, housing, the environment, heritage resources, economic development, public facilities. It also includes some elements such as public parks, recreation, trails, etc. Then there are 4 other volumes that deal specifically with areas of the county. So there's a little bit of overlap in terms of kind of the geographies of these, but there are 4 main. Basically, the comp plan is broken into 4 main areas, just for organizational purposes. Within those, we have some areas that are called special areas, where we have some specific guidance in terms of these kind of smaller geographies, which we can get into. But the plan starts out at 4 main areas. We also have 11 planning districts and then special areas. And then we get all the way down in terms of our plan recommendations, in some cases down to the parcel level. So there's a kind of a reverse, like a reverse pyramid, I guess you could say, in terms of policies, where you have countywide policies and then some specific to the district level, and then smaller and smaller and smaller, all the way down in some cases to recommendations regarding land use and density, for example, at the parcel level. So in a lot of different components of the comprehensive plan that live within this. There's also some maps. So looking at the transportation plan for the county. So this is dealing with planned improvements from a road perspective. We also have a trails plan. So this is dealing with planned trails and trail construction elements. So there's not just the focus on the vehicular network, but also on trails. And then we also have a bicycle master plan, which is dealing specifically with bicycle mobility throughout the county. And then lastly, we do have a plan glossary, which is a relatively small component, but it just defines terms that are used throughout the plan, just so that we have consistency in terms of our language. So the concept for future development, I like this slide. It's one of our kind of lesser known sections of the comprehensive plan, but I think it's really illustrative in terms of what our focus is in terms of what, if somebody were to ask you, what does the comprehensive plan say about Fairfax County? Boil it down into one or, just one or two paragraphs. I would have everybody, if they can, focus specifically on this, which is the concept for future development. It is a general map that shows kind of the location of our mixed use centers. And this, I think, is the most important thing, because in terms of where we want to shape, how we want to shape Fairfax County's growth, it's all about our mixed use centers, and it's all about our activity centers in terms of where we want the planned growth to go. There's plenty of areas that are kind of designated as low density residential suburban neighborhoods, kind of these lower density areas where the comprehensive plan essentially says in most cases that little to no change is planned. So it's not that those areas are completely off limits to development, but it's that, in terms of where we want to see new development, just writ large, it's generally speaking in our mixed use centers. So that's Tyson's, which is kind of shown in this black color, as well as our suburban centers, which are the purple areas, so Merrifield, Fairfax Center, Dulles Suburban Center, as well as our transit station areas, which are, I don't like the color here because I think it blends into the background too much. But it's the areas that are along our metro line. So looking at the Silver Line up towards Reston, coming out from Tyson's, as well as the Blue Line into Springfield, and the Orange Line, which extends down to almost close, or almost, it's close to where I live, near the city of Fairfax. But this shows in general kind of the location of where we want our urban growth to go, and where we're planning for it, kind of writ large.
Just to ask a question before
Yeah.
move on. Do you mind just going back to the map for a second?
Sure.
So you said this shows where we want to grow. Does that mean that I had assumed that this shows what it currently is, right? Where like the purple is the suburban, and the red is community business center, etc. Or am I misreading it? Is that actually like what they want the future state to be, and not necessarily what the current state is?
So these are the geographies. These are the geographies of the existing suburban centers and the existing community business centers, within which, and I will say that the geographies for those are, I would say, larger than the areas where the actual development is today. But these are the areas where, yes, they're the existing geographies for these planned areas, and they are also where, in general, we want the majority of our urban growth to go. So kind of both.
Is there a reason why the certain areas, especially the Mount Vernon and the Route 1 corridor, were identified as the industrial areas? Is that historical and something we can't address the equity issues there, or?
So yeah, we have, I think the answer is yes, it is historical. We do have, I think, 3 industrial areas. One that I believe is just to the west of the Beltway. You can see it if you're going, I guess, inner loop of the Beltway towards Tyson's, for example, you'll see it off on your left-hand corner. There's a big U-Haul distribution area. So that's number 33. And then you have the area north of the Mixing Bowl, which is also an industrial area that you can drive. You'll notice it when you drive through towards Alexandria. And then the south, getting closer to Lorton, and the Mason Neck, which is also industrial in character. So yes, it is historical. It is an area that we've known that these areas developed in a lot of cases prior to residential growth. So from a county policy perspective, I think that there absolutely are questions about equity. I think that's recognized. And in terms of how we deal with these areas moving forward, the thing that we would also reference, and I think this gets to one of the earlier slides we were talking about, competing interests or competing goals. It's not necessarily competing interests, but competing goals within the comp plan, is that we actually, despite their location and kind of their clustering along the I-95 corridor, we actually do want to retain something of an industrial base in the county, given that they do provide employment and the diversity in terms of our economic mix. So they are planned to remain. There are some options, I guess you could say, for those areas to convert over to other types of uses that are less impactful, I guess you could say, such as office. But in general, we do, from a county perspective, want to retain industrial in the county so that we don't lose out on that tax base as well as the employment that it generates.
So I can't
There
I
are
can't really
equity issues that are raised for sure. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, was it Sarah? Were you next? Oh, me. Okay. I can't really
sorry.
tell. It looks like along Route 1, there's some red area pockets. I can't really tell from the slide. So it looks
Yeah.
like we do still have some community business centers that are planned along the Route 1 area. And I guess I'm just curious, is that taking into effect the Richmond corridor and like the BRT and the redevelopment that's planned along that area? Trying to
Absolutely.
cluster in those. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I actually have a better image of that in a couple of slides that speaks specifically to that. So
Oh, sorry to jump the gun.
yeah, got it. Hey, you're just setting the stage. It's all good. So.
There we go.
I will ask another question, if that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much. And sorry, yeah, maybe you're talking about this later on. I think to your point, this map is just so illuminating that I really do feel myself like grasping onto it. So thank you. So just to also clarify something, so this is the concept for the future development, and I know we're talking about zoning, etc. So does that mean that for example, low density residential area, suburban neighborhood, transit station area, etc., like those are specific, types of areas? Should I be reading this as like that area is being, oh, amazing. Thank you, Denver. Should I read that as this being zoned as a suburban neighborhood and therefore must remain a suburban neighborhood? Or, for example, around the transit station, same question, because I'm conscious that one of the things that, we were talking about when putting together our document was, that connectivity and better capitalizing on existing transit to, build mixed use spaces and, perhaps build up the areas around the metro more, which is why I put in the chat that I'm quite surprised to see that so many of the metro stations are actually within the suburban neighborhood low density residential areas. So my question for you is, should I be reading this as in like those areas therefore must remain like this without unless there's a change in the zoning law, or is there still some flexibility and it could be, we could shape the thought process around those kinds of locations?
Absolutely. That is the question, I guess you could say. So in terms of what we have here, this is the plan recommendation for the entirety of the county. And it's very, as you can tell, very high level. What we also have in addition to this, which is the concept for future development, which deals with the very longest term, is we actually have a more detailed comprehensive plan land use map, which gets into far more detail in terms of recommended land uses, recommended densities, and intensities depending on your land use type. So I'll show that to you in a second. But to your answer to your question of, does this reflect, or does this mean that these areas are zoned specifically to allow for X, Y, and Z uses? The answer is no. This is the long-term plan. It's a guide. And we'll talk about the zoning ordinance in a second and how things kind of put together. But I start here because this is the highest level that we have in Fairfax, and it gets more detailed very quickly. Let's just put it that way. So. All right. But before we get to the next map, I'll just mention this again. I already referenced it, but I'll mention it again that we do have the policy plan, which deals with countywide policy. So that's that first volume of the comprehensive plan. Deals with the board's goals, policies, objectives regarding specific topic areas. So land use, transportation, housing, for example. We have a fairly detailed set of specific policies that deal with each of these. So environmental policy, heritage resources, et cetera, et cetera. Here are the plan geography. So as I mentioned, we do have four area volumes in the comprehensive plan that deal specifically with kind of subsets of the county. And then within each of those areas, there are districts. So for example, the Mount Vernon is located within Area 4. Springfield's located within Area 4. Upper Potomac, which includes Reston, for example, is located in Area 3. So that it's just a different way of kind of dividing things up. Those areas also contain the recommendations for some specific, as we call them, special areas in the comprehensive plan. So that's when we're starting to get into that level of geography that you're picking up on, Sarah, which are the transit station areas, the suburban centers, Tyson's Urban Center, for example. So the district texts, each of these districts has a plan for it, and then within each of those, there's this even smaller set of recommendations regarding specific geographies. All right, so here's that slide that I kind of referenced, Casey, regarding the Richmond Highway Corridor. So this shows, I think, in a better resolution, those red areas which are shown along Route 1. And so you'll see along the Richmond Highway Corridor, we do have CBCs, community business centers, which are our activity centers. It's where we want to concentrate most of our urban growth within. So going down the corridor, for example, you start at North Gateway. So that's looking at kind of the spaghetti of interchanges. For example, when you get right across the bridge and you've got Alexandria on your right and Fairfax on your left. Pendaw, Hybla Valley, Gum Springs, South County Center, and Woodlawn. Oh, and Beacon Groveton, of course. So those are our main areas down the corridor. You may have heard the term embark, but that was a recent planning effort that looked at higher density development within each of these CBCs. And the rationale is that we are planning for a bus rapid transit system that would extend down the corridor to help support not only Metro in a potential future extension of the yellow line down the corridor, decades from now, but also to be able to allow these areas to redevelop. And so these are areas that are designated as growth areas and where we want to see a revitalization and renewal. The other one that I'll mention here, so those are the CBCs. One other area, for example, that we have kind of a specific designated land use plan for is Reston. So Reston is also undergoing a comprehensive plan amendment right now that's looking at a number of factors, but this is an interesting graphic as it shows in a slightly higher resolution what the plan is for each of these areas of Reston. So you have areas that are in kind of the pink and red as the areas that are shown along the Silver Line and the Dulles Toll Road that are planned for that higher intensity mixed use development in the TSAs. And then areas that are showing green, open space, obviously, orange being those that are planned for lower density residential uses. Within the comp plan, we also have a transportation plan. And so within the district texts of the comprehensive plan for each of those districts that I showed you, we do have specific recommendations in terms of planned transportation improvements. So this is looking at not just roadway improvements, but also transit improvements, as well as pedestrian improvements and bicycle. So this graphic on the right-hand side shows the relatively new transportation plan for Pendaw CBC, which is one of the CBCs along the Richmond Highway Corridor. So it shows, for example, our ecological spine, our livability spines, which are two planning concepts that we're using along the Richmond Highway to try to improve connectivity throughout the corridor. In addition to the dark red, or excuse me, the kind of the lighter red, which is the bus rapid transit plan. A couple of planning terms that I throw around, but want to make sure everybody knows the terms specifically as they relate to Fairfax County's plan. Residential density, so this is typically expressed in terms of dwelling units per acre. So a couple of examples of what we mean when we say dwelling units to the acre kind of really runs the gamut from low density. So you might see quarter acre lots, for example, at 4 dwelling units to the acre. Single family detached homes are typically associated with that level of density. Townhouses, 2/2s, you'll typically see 5 to 8 dwelling units to the acre. Garden style apartments, slightly higher. And then mid-rise and high-rise, 16 dwelling units to the acre on up. So they're depending on what you're looking for in terms of the character of your neighborhood, the plan will, in most cases, specify out a density as the metric for looking at how much development is out there and is planned for. The other big one that we have for mostly non-residential development, but also some mixed use, vertical mixed use development, is intensity. So this is distinct from density, but it's expressed in terms of a floor area ratio. And that's basically just a ratio of looking at the area of the building divided by the area of the land upon which it's situated. So kind of a typical example is if you have 1,000 square foot, 100,000 square foot office building, for example, that's situated on about a 2.5 acre site, 100,000 square foot site, that's a 1.0 FAR. So it could mean one level of a one-story building encompassing the entirety of that area, but it could also mean you stack it and just concentrate it in one specific area. So 1.0 FAR, it gives you some info in terms of how much development is out there, but it doesn't necessarily tell you the exact character. I would mention we do have in our comprehensive plan, we have a specific section that deals with community revitalization. And so this is looking at some of the older areas of the county and looking at specifically dealing with infill redevelopment and ways that we can sustain the economic vitality and quality of life in these older commercial centers and in some of their adjacent neighborhoods through revitalization. So in these areas, we have a number of policies and strategies to accomplish this, partnering with the revitalization groups, community groups to develop goals and standards for these areas. We develop incentives for private investment and private redevelopment, encouraging more flexible approaches to conventional zoning so that we can get the kind of mixed use development that we want in these areas. So a couple of these areas in particular, Annandale, Bailey's Crossroads, Seven Corners, McLean, the CBCs along Richmond Highway. And then we also have 2 revitalization areas at Lake Ann and Maryfield, as well as Lincolnia. One of I think one of the cool things about working in these areas is that we have urban design guidelines that we can use. That we have one volume of urban design guidelines, which are universally applicable across all of our revitalization areas. And then we also have, I think in every case, specific urban design standards that are applicable for that area. So one example is Annandale, which is actually right now going through an effort to update those update those guidelines because it's just time. They haven't updated them in a while. So they're going through those categorically and methodically to ensure that they're reflecting what the vision is for those specific areas. So that's when we get into what I think is kind of one of the more interesting, kind of exciting parts of planning, which is looking at design rather than just kind of the conventional approaches, which are just looking at intensity, density, and land use. I think that where the profession is heading, I think, frankly, is looking more at design and how we create spaces. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that there is a lot of interest in the revitalization end of things. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I can't help but bring it up since it's what I do most of all day long is amendments to the comprehensive plan. So we have a lot of ways that we can amend the comprehensive plan. It's very much a dynamic living document. It's not something that just sits on a shelf in Fairfax County and that nobody looks at it. People are looking at it and it's being reviewed and reevaluated and amended continuously. So we can do amendments to the policy plan, which is the countywide policy. We did that fairly recently on the workforce dwelling unit policy. So that's the countywide policy that was dealing specifically with affordable housing. We can do amendments to the area. So the area plans, looking at area-wide studies. A couple of examples of that are the Reston study, which is ongoing right now, looking at the entirety of Reston. Another one is the McLean CBC study, which is looking at the McLean CBC and dealing with some changes there. And then we can look at the site-specific level. So in some cases, you might have recommendations in the comprehensive plan that deal with land use and intensity or density, all the way down, as I mentioned, to kind of the parcel or a collection of parcels. So we do what we call SSPA, which is a 2-year cycle of looking at the northern half of the county and the southern half of the county and focusing on amendments in those specific areas. And then there's always the board has the sole authority to authorize amendments. So they can kind of authorize whatever they like as they see fit. plan amendment process, again, not going to dwell on this too much, but we have a work program where we schedule our plan amendments for review. We conduct an impact analysis, engage the public. In a lot of cases, we use task forces, ad hoc task forces to help us review and develop the plan text. And then we go through a series of public hearings with the Planning Commission and the board. If the board so chooses, they can adopt it, and then it becomes a part of the comprehensive plan. All right, so that's it on the comp plan side of things. Any questions before we jump over to zoning? I haven't been monitoring the chat. I'm going to pull it up really quickly.
I'm just conscious of time
Yeah.
because I know that the meeting was supposed to end at 8 and it's 7:52 now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I just wanted to bring that up and just make sure that we've got time to do what, if there's an outcome that we're supposed to have from this meeting, or if this is just an educational meeting and then the next meeting, we'll take this further. So I just wanted to flag that, but I'm happy to do, whatever Casey
Well,
you
if
think
you,
best.
if you guys would like, we can kind of put a pin in it right at that point, and we can talk about the zoning piece of it at a future meeting if that's something you guys want to hear or learn more information about. So we can just have a little bit of time now to discuss if there are any questions on the comp plan. And then I know we have one other agenda item as well. So is that okay, Graham, if we kind of hold off on the zoning piece of the puzzle? And then, like I said, if there's an interest from Sarah, from you in Denver, I can do that at a later meeting, or we cannot talk about it at all, whatever the subcommittee would like to do.
It's no problem on my end. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So any other questions on the comp plan? I mean, I guess I'll start with just a broad one. For this group, I think we're still trying to figure out how best to, I don't want to say insert ourselves, but to become a part of the process. And it sounds like from what we've been with our scoping questions, we really want to be looking and being involved in the discussions on what the future land uses look like in certain areas. So I guess what's the best approach for us to be in the know of when there are different plan amendments, or is it the policy plan that we should be focusing our efforts rather than more site-specific or area-specific plan amendments? Do you have any guidance for us, Graham, on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to limit you to just the countywide policy. I think that there are things that we do on the work program, and this is when we're looking at the schedule of review of all the amendments or changes to the comprehensive plan, that I think that the council may want to be interested in, that aren't necessarily a countywide policy. Absolutely, I think that that's probably the easiest one to say. Absolutely, yes. The second one would be area plan changes, and some of them, it may or may not be of interest. Some of them are so specific to like just a parcel or a collection of parcels that there just might not be the interest. That being said, there are a couple of resources that we have so that you can kind of stay in the loop, so that you can basically decide for yourself, which are our listserv and also is our Facebook page. So we have a Fairfax County land use planning page where we regularly post information about what's going on the work program and the things that we're doing. And then we have a listserv, and the listserv really kind of describes whenever there's a new board authorization for a plan amendment. It gives you a synopsis on what it's all about, what's changing. In some cases, will be kind of technical. We'll start just talking about, on this tax map parcel, where the board asked us to study a 1.0 FAR dealing with blah blah blah. I think the more interesting ones, frankly, will be the countywide policy changes, because that's where, those are they're all important, but those are the ones where I think that in terms of the direction of the county, that I think that's the one to kind of keep the finger on the pulse, so to speak.
Okay, that's really helpful. And if you don't mind, if you could make a note to send us the listserv sign up and the Facebook, could you send that to the three of us? And then if we're okay, the three of us can just, follow or sign up on the listservs. And then when something comes out that we're like, hey, that has to do with our subcommittee, then we can, if it's of interest, we can raise it to this group and then work with you, Graham, on who we need to ask to come talk to us about it, or how we can provide our young adult perspective as a part of that process. So
Absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. I completely echo, what Casey just asked because, it's, yeah, definitely we'll sign up and look at the Facebook page and, follow it and see if there's anything of interest. I also would love to know from you if there's any opportunities to be more active, in participating and providing our input, instead of more, reactive of us looking at, publicly accessible, Facebook pages or listservs, which certainly anyone could and anyone should, be able to contribute. But I'm just thinking, our role is to represent the young people in Fairfax County, and I'd love to be able to have more of an opportunity to play more of a proactive role in, in impacting this comp plan.
I think that one of the ways that you can be more proactive, you know what I mean, that everyone can be more proactive, is by talking to their supervisors about their membership, or they're being tapped basically to be on our community task forces. So our task forces, as I mentioned, they help staff once an authorization comes in, to develop plan guidance. And this is prior to it going to the Planning Commission. This is prior to it going to the Board of Supervisors. We, as on the staff end of things, as a part of our public engagement, as our community engagement, we really try to work with task forces whenever we can. There's not a task force that's always assigned when a plan amendment happens, but for the larger studies, there typically is. So all the SSPAs that we're dealing with, for example, those site-specific plan amendments that we're dealing with, those all go through task forces. And those are all, I think, 100% community members. So, and I will say that the membership on them, it varies. They are appointed by the supervisors. So it's not something that we on DPD end of things can have much influence over, so to speak. But if there's interest in kind of having a more active, proactive role in land use planning, that's a great place to start, because the work that goes on in task forces, when it's done right, makes the job of the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors a heck of a lot easier, because the community is involved. The community is writing the plan, basically. And that's, frankly, from a land use planning standpoint, kind of ideal, because it's supposed to be the people's plan. So
Yeah, that's great.
off my soapbox, but I think that's probably the best place to be proactive. It's my 2 cents.
I mean, I wonder if there's, Denver and Casey, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Like, I wonder if there's an opportunity for us to try to, work with the other subcommittee that's on community outreach to just amplify that this is an opportunity that, young people should be raising their hands, contacting their supervisors about. Because I wonder if people know that it exists, and I would love to be able to, recommend to the supervisors that when they are appointing these people, they consider, I know we talked about diversity briefly in the chat, but that is something that's considered from an age standpoint as well.
And maybe that's something we can raise at the end of our next full committee meeting. Maybe it's something that, we can say we talked about during this committee, and, getting more of a young presence on the stakeholder groups, and for just, starting to talk to your board member, we can encourage that in terms of all county policies, be it land use, affordable housing, everything. So I see it as 8 o'clock. So it sounds like in the chat, we're okay with our next meeting doing a kind of zoning overview, and then we can talk about any other additional kind of questions, comments, maybe if you think of any from this, as well as zoning. And then maybe at that one, we can have a discussion of any other topics thanks, Denver. Sorry, I saw your chat. We can talk about any additional topics that we want to discuss at the upcoming subcommittee meetings. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, that sounds good for me,
Okay.
Casey. Thanks. And
Okay.
I hope you saw in the chat, both Denver and I would really love to hear your presentation.
Sure.
So definitely,
I was gonna say, I'm open to talking about other things by all means. I talk about this all day long too. So if we can do zoning, we can do transportation, we can bring in other people. I want this subcommittee to get to hear from all different perspectives and a bunch of different groups. So if there's anybody else you want to hear from the next time or the following, we can talk about that and get some people lined up to chat with us. So
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, one of the things that's really helpful is just to understand how we can influence and like,
yes.
who do we have to talk to? Who do we have to email? Which rooms do we have to get in? To make sure that we are doing what we were appointed to do, right? Bringing in young people's voices into the decision-making process. So, really like, I think it's really important that we've got a basic grasp on this stuff, like how it works in Fairfax County for the committee that we're, passionate about, the subcommittee we're passionate about. But I also would love to just continue to make sure that we're, asking the questions and learning, okay, how do we translate this into action?
Yes, I think that's awesome, and I think we should maybe, as our next on our next agenda, do a brainstorming session about exactly that specific topic. How do we continue to turn this into action? So that's great. Okay, I know it's 2 minutes over, so thank you everybody. Do I need to make a motion to adjourn, Graham? Do you know?
You as the chair have the sole authority to do that or not. So
Okay. I'm just going to say this meeting is adjourned. Thank you everybody for joining tonight, and see you next week probably, right? Yes. All right.